Welcome back to another episode of Next Level Fishing. So in a previous episode, you saw I broke one of my dad's rods, and that's what I've got right here. It's a Bionic Blade Bass Pro Shops rod, and based on the code on the back, I can tell that it was made in 2000. So it's a 20-year-old rod. And I was trying to do some repair work on it and ended up breaking the tip, as you can see. And you know, at this point, one thing that a lot of people would end up doing is just throwing the rod out. You know, in this case, it's well out of warranty. It's no good. It's broken so far up that you really can't put another tip on it. You know, at this point, I probably broke the top, I'm gonna say 1.5 feet off, and so you're left with a rod that was 6.5 feet, is now roughly 5 feet. It's really not a usable rod. But what I'm here to tell you is that there's still value in this, and what I would recommend doing is turning this into a lure retrieving rod. And really all you need to do that is a reel and a little bit of rod. You know, what I'm specifically looking at doing is putting line on the rod where I can quickly drop a lure retriever down to a snagged lure, whether it's a crankbait, spinnerbait, whatever it is. And at that point then I can, you know, hopefully knock off the bait and quickly reel it in versus using just a simple lure retriever, you know, where you've just got a bunch of rope on it right now, and that can just lead to a big tangle in the boat and a pain in the butt. I've found that if you keep a lure retriever rod in the boat, it just makes everything so much simpler, and it's a lot faster as well. So in this case, all you need to do is cut off a chunk of the rod. So you really just need the handle, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach on one guide, probably I'll say roughly about 1 foot up from the reel. And at that point then I've got a lure retriever rod that'll probably be roughly, I'm going to say 20 inches in total length. And at that point it's super easy to store in your boat, doesn't get in the way, and is just really compact. So the first step on this is going to be to cut off the majority of the rod. And what I'm going to do in this case is just grab a chunk of masking tape, and I'm going to put it where I want to cut the rod. So, you know, like I mentioned, I'm probably going to go about 1 foot up from the reel seat. And, you know, again, one other thing to point out in this case, this is a medium heavy rod. So the lower portion of this rod is really strong, and it'll work great for a lure retriever purpose. If this was like a micro light rod, you know, at that point, you'd really probably not going to have the strength in the rod or the reel seat to withstand the pressure that you'd be putting on it when you're trying to pull plugs out. Because I'm going to put an old reel on this and put some really heavy braided line, and you know, I'm going to be putting a lot of pressure on it when you're trying to break free a crankbait or bend the hooks out. But in this case, so I've got the masking tape where I want it, I've got just a small hacksaw here, and what I'm going to do is literally just cut through that. And I put the masking tape on there just to kind of create, just to prevent any of the graphite from kind of really sharding off and just being a mess. The tape will keep everything compact. It'll give you a clean edge when you're sawing through it. Okay, so we've cut rod off. I can throw that in the trash. I'm going to peel the tape back off. You'll see we've got a nice clean cut there. And again, you're really You're not looking for anything that's super perfect at this point. Remember, this is just going to be an old rod that you're utilizing to hopefully get a few plugs back. I've just got an alcohol swab here. I'm just going to use that to remove some of that masking tape residue that was left. Okay, so now what I want to do is attach a guide to it, and I'm going to put a double-footed guide on just because it's going to be some extra pressure. And again, I recommend using something that's just a, you know, old used guide that you can pop off another rod, or just, you know, one you've got hanging around. But there's no real reason here to use a brand new guide. You're just putting together a couple old pieces to utilize it. You're gonna really beat on it anyways. It's gonna bounce around in your boat. So I've just got a box here of guides, different eyes, different pieces, and you know, here I've got just a double-footed guide, an old used one. So I'm going to take my old guide, I'm going to heat it up just so I can apply some of the rod tip glue to it to keep it in position where I want it. I've got a little glue in my hands. If you melt the eye up, it'll melt on good and allow you a place to stick it. This is an old guide. I just want to make sure I'm attaching it somewhat right. Again, it does not need to be perfect by any means. Okay. So I've got my guide mounted on. I'm going to just start threading these. So you always go one away. I go one away and then I go 3 wraps around. This is going to be a little bit more complicated just because I'm wrapping with the seat of the rod, but we'll get it to work. Again, at this point, it doesn't need to be pretty. We're literally just creating a place for the line to go through. All right, so we've got our guide threaded on, and now we just need to put some epoxy on it. So I'm going to put together a 2-part epoxy and put the epoxy on it and let it go in the rod drying rack. I'm also going to put just a little something up the end of that. I'm not sure yet what, but I'm going to get the epoxy together and figure out what I want to put in the end of that, just so I can epoxy it in and prevent that that sharper edge from potentially breaking the line when I am pulling on it. And we'll check in here with you just in a second. So I just mixed up the 2-part epoxy, applied it to the guide. We've got a nice thick coat on. Again, I'm not really all that concerned about looks. I'm more concerned about functionality. And in this case, a nice thick coat will really make sure that that guide's on there securely, since it will be taking a brunt of the pressure when you're pulling to get your bait out. The last thing I want to point out too that I did in this case, I was able to find, I've got a bag full of beads here, and I was able to find a bead that fit right into the tip, the hollow core of the graphite blank, and wouldn't go into it, but fit into it and had half of it sticking out. So I put that in the end, and then I epoxied over that as well to secure that into place and create a nice rounded top so that the braided line won't be rubbing on that when you are pulling on it. I think that will just help a little bit. Do I think it's necessary? No, but I think it does serve a purpose. So I'm gonna let this dry overnight. Usually takes a good, I'd say 16 hours before it really kind of secures to the point where I want to do anything with it. But I'm gonna let it dry overnight, and then I'll go find a reel and be back with you tomorrow to finish off this little project. And I hope you're enjoying it so far. Stay tuned. All right, guys. So we've got our rod. It's completed. The rod epoxy has dried. You can see it on there. We've got our glass bead in the tip to create a nice rounded surface. And then I went ahead and I dug out an old reel that I had sitting in the garage a couple years ago at Lake Chickamauga. I snagged a rod and reel that was on the bottom of the lake, and it was a Abu Garcia Black Max combo, and they were in pretty rough shape, but I was able to clean them up really well. And in this case, the reel works extremely well for being at the bottom of the lake for quite some time, because it was full of barnacles and pretty crummy looking. I was surprised that it still functioned as well as it did. But in this case, I'm putting the reel on this lure retrieving rod, and I think you'd be really surprised at how simple this is, but yet how efficient it is in the boat. You know, for me, the biggest issue I always had with a normal lure retriever is the tag line. You know, you drop it down, you pull it up, you got your bait, but that tag line is laying all over your boat, getting caught in other rods and reels, getting caught in the bait that you retrieved. It just was a pain in the butt. You know, so in this case, you'll be able to reel up your lure retriever with your bait. Line goes right on the reel. Everything is super compact, fits right into any of your boxes in your boat. And it just makes you much more efficient on the water. So, you know, to sum it up, guys, if you've got a broken rod that you're just going to throw out and you don't have a lure retriever rod, I highly recommend making one. You'll really be thankful when you have it in the boat, because it is that much more efficient. So it took us 15-20 minutes to do the whole project. Definitely worth the time. Thanks for watching, guys. Like and subscribe.